In Noble's 1994 book, Gender Wars, Talking Peace, the author shares a bit of research that captures the gist of our topic in this video. When asked what they would like to change about the communication patterns of the opposite sex, men said they wanted women to be more direct, and women said they wanted men to stop interrupting and offering advice. This is not true of all men or all women, but it does point out an important area of concern in dealing with interpersonal communication. No matter our gender or the type of relationship, being successful in our interpersonal communication relies heavily on our ability to understand and manage verbal messages. Our focus in this video is not the important principles involved in understanding verbal messages. Instead, the focus will be on applying our understanding of verbal messages and suggesting effective ways we can manage those messages to create better relationships. When we hear a verbal message from someone, we have a series of choices to make. The difficulty in communication often occurs when we don't isolate those choices and make conscious decisions. Think about the last time you really misunderstood a verbal message. It was probably because of a quick emotionally charged reaction to your initial perceived understanding of that message. Let's consider 4 choices we need to make about verbal messages. The first choice you need to make when you hear a verbal message is to not focus too intently on the details. Focus on the bigger picture. Just having the ability to talk and create verbal messages doesn't mean that everyone we speak to will excel at creating those messages. It's easy to zoom in on the detail of word choices and how those people express the message. A different strategy is to remember the larger relationship or the bigger picture. Examine the context and the other person's outlook. It is a choice to focus on the bigger picture. A second choice you need to make when you hear a verbal message is to not react to inferences as fact. An inference is based on what someone else observes or thinks and then makes conclusions about. The message might contain emotionally charged meanings that are not always clear. Many of our conversations are not just factual statements about clearly observable truths. Instead, we often share and receive verbal messages that contain meanings that may or may not be verifiable or even quickly understood. The potential for conflict arises when we take a verbal message that is really an inference as a fact. A wise stance to take with verbal messages that might be inferences is to consider the statement for what it is, a conclusion that someone else is making. Back away from reacting too strongly to the message as if it were a declaration of fact that needs to be challenged. Don't assume, and spend time asking questions to find a clearer meaning. This is a choice. A third choice you need to make when you hear a verbal message is to not be trapped by polarizing statements. Choices in communication involve critically thinking about the messages you hear from others. It's easy for all of us to think in terms of either or thinking that it can be only one extreme or the other. This can easily lead to stereotyping or being satisfied to label people and things into categories. Managing verbal messages means that we need to stop and listen for polarizing or labeling statements. When someone else uses this type of verbal message, we can make a choice to more effectively manage our response to the conversation by not responding mentally or verbally to this type of rash thinking. The fourth choice you need to make when you hear a verbal message is to avoid static evaluation of others. We easily fall into the trap of making a judgment of someone based on a past group of messages or interaction, and we stick with that evaluation. Let's reverse this for a moment. Are you the same person you were a year or 2 years ago? Have you grown, or has your conversations with others changed based on reactions and interactions with others? The fact is, you are not static, and others are not as well. We must be cautious with some people, but if we're talking about choices we need to make with verbal messages, one choice needs to be to allow others to grow and change. Give people the opportunity to grow. Often, what you put out in your own verbal messages tends to be returned, positive or negative. All right, here's the final exam question on verbal messages. Be able to determine the difference between an inference and a factual statement. Verbal messages are not always easy to understand and interpret. The quick, emotionally charged response to verbal messages is seldom the best. Break your reaction down into choices. The choice to look at the bigger picture. The choice to listen for inferences and not react to them as facts. The choice to avoid being trapped by polarizing statements. And the choice to not treat others as if they were static. We need to manage verbal messages and not let the messages manage us. See you in the next video.